What's up, everybody? Happy Friday to you. It is late for some of you. Not so much on my end in my neck of the woods, but hey, it's Friday evening, and we've got ourselves some big news. We're going to take a little break from a live show this week, as you probably noticed with the big show, but this came across the wire on Friday evening and kind of said, we should probably talk about this at least for just a little bit. We're not going to be on here too long, but felt like we should talk about this and at least, update you on some things and see where we're at because of this news and everything. I'm Anthony Cosenza. This is the Orange and Black Insider, part of the Cincy Jungle podcast channel. And of course, in case you haven't heard, the Cincinnati Bengals and their star running back, Joe Mixon, have reportedly agreed to a contract restructure. We haven't heard all the figures yet. We haven't heard all the numbers on it yet. But this has been something that's been obviously in the works for quite some time. There are a lot of pieces to this and a lot of things that have lined this up. But, we just kind of have felt like, hey, this is something that this probably was going to happen. And we felt that way since the season's concluded, as people kind of looked at the numbers. And, of course, you're talking about a Joe Burrow extension. You're talking about a T. Higgins extension, an eventual Jamar Chase extension. And then, of course, you got Logan Wilson. So you've got a lot of star players that you want to retain, especially because this free agency period this year, the Bengals lost a little more key players than they probably would have liked or expected. And you're talking Samaje Perine, you're talking Jesse Bates, Von Bell. So, I think that and part of that is also because the Bengals have, knew that these extensions were coming as well. So it's kind of like, man, we got to really prioritize not only, some of the short-term stuff, but a lot of the long-term stuff. And the long-term stuff is, the long-term plans are also dictating what we have seen short-term, right? So that being said, we'll pull up let's pull up the article here, and because it's got the tweets and everything, so you can kind of see all the quotes and different things like that. And I'll talk about a couple of different things involved in that. This is on Cincy Jungle. I will pin the link in the live chats for those who are watching live and or if you're watching after the fact, and you can kind of scroll the comments here. Some knucklehead, this guy on Cincy Jungle wrote it. But Bengals and Joe Mixon agree to a contract restructure, and I will pin this here for you. There you go for you folks there, so you can go check out the article. Here's some of the stuff in it. Of course, there are some tweets. Tom Pelissero of the NFL Network wrote that the Bengals and running back Joe Mixon are finalizing a restructured contract that will keep him in Cincinnati for the 2023 season. Per sources, Mixon was due $10.1 million this season with a $12.791 million cap number. The new deal frees up cash and cap for Cincinnati, and Mixon stays RB1. And then there was another quote by Adam Schefter here from Mixon's agent, Peter Schaefer. Bengals running back Joe Mixon, who had a $9.4 million non-guaranteed base salary, agreed tonight. This is Adam Schefter's word, by the way. Agreed tonight to restructure his contract to remain in Cincinnati. Quote, this is from Peter Schaefer. Joe's goal is to win a Super Bowl and play his career in Cincinnati, and this is the best way to accomplish these goals. So that is, those are some of the words there. And you see there, there's the reiterating the number. There was per over the cap, a 5.5 million dead cap number this year for Joe Mixon. And obviously there's a lot of nuances and facts and figures that go into that. There's, the post and pre and post June 1 cut numbers and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of nuances to this, but here's the other thing that I wrote about on here. And yes, I am that knucklehead that I referenced earlier on the article that wrote this on Cincy Jungle. But here's the thing I wanted to point out here, of course, and a lot of folks know at least some of this, but there is a league-wide devaluation of the position. You see there are some outliers, right? You see San Francisco kind of make a big swing for Christian McCaffrey, and previously he was a guy who signed a big contract. So there are some outliers to this, but this was kind of writing on the wall for Mixon. We kind of felt like with those extensions, and I don't like to talk about all this stuff, but there are some situations that have occurred this offseason surrounding Mixon for really the first time in his professional career. So you kind of go, okay, well, now, the leverage game in that situation. But, Mixon is still very young for being drafted in 2017. And a guy who was drafted in the first round that year, and a guy that a lot of folks thought the Bengals might go for that year, Dalvin Cook. He was recently released by the Minnesota Vikings, and he had 4 Pro Bowls with that team. He had signed a big contract with that team the same offseason, 2020, the same summer that Joe Mixon signed his big contract with the Bengals, in which the Bengals are now restructuring. So there are a lot of themes here in where today's NFL is going. I mean, you see that. I mean, the parallels there. I mean, Cincinnati made the decision to keep Mixon, though. And the Vikings and Cook, after the Vikings couldn't trade Cook or, whatever occurred there, they, made the decision, okay, we're going to part ways. And so, Dalvin Cook's talking about all kinds of different things, but they both signed big extensions in 2020 as running backs in the same draft class. So, the career arcs here are a bit similar, but, as we've said before on this show in a number of different areas, I mean, the Bengals showed a lot of good faith and a lot of confidence in Joe Mixon being their guy, their top running back in 2023. And what I mean by that is they had, again, I don't want to harp on the headlines, this offseason's headlines with Joe Mixon, but those were there, right? I mean, you can't really deny that. Those were out there. A lot of people know that there's some stuff with that. Aside from that, Cincinnati had a chance to, and I think they thought that they were going to keep Samaje Perine, but they didn't. And they didn't, up the ante there or anything like that. And I think Samaje said, hey, if it's similar money, I'm going to go take a role where I can get some more touches and maybe be the guy, or, a 1A to a 1B, you know what I mean? Like he's kind of the 1B maybe here, or he has been. And so now he's going to take a bigger role and more touches and higher profile. So he's going to do that. But the Bengals didn't go into free agency. Okay, we need to get another Perine, right? I mean, they kept kind of the status quo. They re-signed Travion Williams, seemingly giving him a promotion, right? And then they drafted Chase Brown, but they waited all the way to the 5th round to draft a running back. You kind of figured, okay, is that coming on night 2? Is that, where are they going to go with this here? And the Bengals waited and waited. Now, Chase Brown has starter potential. I think he can be a solid running back, especially initially a solid rotational running back, but he is a guy that will be an eventual starter perhaps, or another, two-headed monster down the road when the Bengals make different decisions here at the running back position. But the point being is when you do not replace a Samaje Perine per se in free agency, you re-sign Travion Williams and kind of promote him, and then you wait until the 5th round. There's not a big statement there to say, this is our new RB1, right? And they could have done that, and they could have done that, for cheaper and gone that route. But they value a lot of things that Joe Mixon has done. I mean, really up until this offseason, we know some things that also happened in college. We don't need to rehash all of that stuff. But up until this offseason, he has really, there's been a big turnaround in him. And I still think that he has shown a lot of high character with the Cincinnati Bengals. And in that locker room, he is viewed as a leader. There is a reason that Zach Taylor hung on to only a select few of Marvin Lewis's holdovers. And I'm talking hung on to Marvin Lewis holdovers well into this new team, this new team that they've built and he has built. I mean, obviously, in 2019 he had a lot of them. 2020 he had some, and now there's very few. And you're talking Sam Hubbard, you're talking Tyler Boyd, you're talking Joe Mixon. I mean, there's a select few that he has hung on to, and there is a specific reason to that. So, I think this was always maybe in the Bengals' plans that they were going to keep Joe Mixon. Obviously, they were going to add to the stable. Whether they kept Travion Williams and or Samaje Perine in free agency, they were probably going to add some depth at running back in the draft, regardless. But if it seems like that this is who we want as RB1. Look, I mean, even on, I guess, one of the supposed weekends that one of these headlines from this offseason occurred, Joe Mixon was outstanding in one of the most important games in franchise history, going to Buffalo and playing in the snow and beating Buffalo. He had 105 rushing yards, another 18 receiving yards, and a touchdown on the ground. He was running like a man possessed that day, and the offensive line played well. I mean, so he had a great performance in one of the team's biggest wins ever. And then you look at, statistically speaking, he is I think he's number 5 overall in rushing yards as a running back in team history. He's number 4 overall in rushing touchdowns. A lot of other metrics you can talk about, but I mean, he's basically a top 5 running back in team history. And so you don't just kind of say, especially when he's not, 30, 31, you don't just kind of say, okay, bye so easily. And so maybe the draft fell a certain way that the Bengals didn't like. And so maybe they were in a wait and see mode. We don't really know that for sure, but I kind of get the feeling that this was kind of always the plan, and they were going to keep Mixon around, and it was going to be agreed upon that there was going to be some sort of restructuring. So those are the reports. We don't have the figures quite yet, at least not since I've taken the air here on Friday evening, but the Bengals and Joe Mixon have reportedly agreed, per multiple sources, and even his agent has come out and made a quote that they have reportedly agreed to a contract restructure. Now, obviously, what that points to are the contract extensions. As I mentioned, Burrow, you got Higgins. Those are the two, kind of top priorities there. You got Logan Wilson, part of that 2020 class that you want to extend as well. You want to extend Jamar Chase, obviously, but him coming a year later, you have a little more time there. So, I mean, the big priority, and we keep saying, when the Burrow contract falls, that's the domino that kind of knocks over the other one because it's going to be the biggest. They're going to structure other contracts likely around the figures that come with Joe Burrow's numbers and everything. So that's kind of what this is pointing to. And if you have been a Bengals fan or have followed the team or both for, really into the Marvin Lewis years and into now, you will have seen a trend wherein the Bengals love to, when they have a core player that's set to hit free agency, maybe a year or two in advance, that sort of thing, they love to use this time, the summer, as the time when they reconvene in training camp and even before, to really kind of reassess financials and work out contracts with players and their agents as they are there in camp and get everything sorted out that way. They did that with Carlos Dunlap before. They did that with Geno Atkins. I remember them doing it with Andrew Whit. I mean, they use this time to do that. And so we're kind of starting to see, I say the Burrow contract is the first domino to fall. Maybe the Mixon restructuring was technically the first domino to fall to then hit the Burrow contract and go on and on and on. This is obviously kind of giving the team cap flexibility, cash flexibility, and that's pointing to extensions, namely one for Joe Burrow. There have been in case you haven't known the whole cycle or heard the cycle, whether it's on this show or the many other great outlets that cover the team, there have been a lot of different rumors that, okay, now that Jalen Hurts is done and Lamar Jackson's contract is done, that's time now that the Bengals have benchmarks and they can use that for Joe Burrow. Well, yes, but they may also be waiting. There was another report that Burrow may also be waiting on Justin Herbert's contract that he may be getting with the Chargers, just to make sure that he is either the highest paid or to make sure that every base is covered there in terms of numbers and structure and all of that. But I whether that happens or not, I think this is now kind of the big piece to say, okay, this is what we need to do. This is how we're going to move forward with some of these contracts, and go from there. Now, I know there's a lot of doubters, especially nationally, that the Bengals can get all of the aforementioned extensions done that I have mentioned: Burrow, Higgins, Chase, Wilson, and hang on to all of these guys. But we've seen them do it before. I mean, if you go back in history, in team history, again in the Marvin Lewis era, I mean, they were paying Carson, they were paid Chad, they paid Willie Anderson, they paid Levi Jones, they paid TJ Hushmanzada, they paid Rudy Johnson. So again, there's this narrative around the team that still exists that isn't necessarily true, because when you go back into history 17 to 20 years, you will see, and even further than that, I mean, they pay wide receivers, they pay running backs, they've done that before. So if you go back, they've shown a track record of being able to keep a lot of star players. And so, I don't necessarily buy into the whole rhetoric of they're not going to be able to do that, because they've done that before. But that being said, I would expect a lot of some things to maybe move a little bit more quickly than they have been in terms of these extensions. So this is kind of some big news here with Mixon. It kind of came a little bit out of the blue, but that's I guess kind of to be expected with some of these things. We will update you more on numbers on when those come out here. But look, I know it's maybe a tough pill to swallow for Joe Mixon to, take what's viewed as a public pay cut or what have you. But this is kind of a win-win. I think someone said it in here, and I apologize if I didn't pin the comment here. Dan the Man, I think it said it's a win-win situation here. It is, because, again, we just talked about Dalvin Cook, who is now a free agent and looking for work, whereas, Joe Mixon he knows where he's going to be. He seemingly loves this team, loves the locker room, and loves being here. And he will be here. He will still probably be making a significant amount of money, not the same amount of money that he agreed upon in 2020, but his job security, at least for this year, seems to be in place. And this team seems to be in contending position once again. And if things line up the way that they seem to with this news, they're going to be in contending position for the long term. So all of this, it's while it is kind of, a little bit of an ego hit potentially, it is also good news for him, good news for the team, and hopefully good news for other players there. So here's, again, in case you missed it, the Bengals the Bengals and Joe Mixon have reportedly agreed to a contract restructure. And, it was a big contract here. I guess I should show you this. Did I show you the over the cap or I didn't show you this. Let me give you a little snapshot. By the way, Joe Mixon is 27 years old. So we're not talking about, even though he has played, he's in his 7th season now in the NFL. It's not that he came in very young. So a lot of times when we're talking about this kind of situation, we're talking about a running back who is maybe 29, 30, 31, not necessarily 27. And if you look at Joe Mixon, while he has been the primary back for the Cincinnati Bengals, he has, throughout his career, he has had guys who've kind of had big shares of touches and carries, right? He was with Gio Bernard for a number of years. And then, you go to kind of current situations with Samaje Perine. And so while he has had the lion's share of touches and catches and all of that from this position, there have been a lot of players who've come in and contributed. And so I say that as a positive to Joe Mixon because, again, even at 27, not the same kind of wear and tear on the tires. I hate using that analogy, but not the same kind of wear and tear on the tires that we've seen from a number of different backs that could be, that are the primary back of a team or what have you. Here you go. Over the cap. Here, in case here's kind of a snapshot of his contract that he signed in 2020. You see here, these are the 2023 numbers. The base salary was $9.4 million. You have a prorated bonus of $2.75 million, a per game roster bonus of $500,000, a $200,000 workout bonus. Here's the cap number. We've talked about that: $12,791,176. A very exact number, which was accounting for 5.7% of the cap, of the team's cap. And then, you see the dead cap number of 5.5 and potential, you got cap savings here and that sort of thing. So, the Bengals, we'll have to see the numbers here, but, there's some pencil magic that they've obviously done here. But again, this is a lofty number. And how lofty is it? We're going to go to, I know we just did over the cap, and some people prefer over the cap and some people prefer Spotrac, but I like both. I like both. And so let's go to the running back position on, is it Spotrac? I don't know. But here's kind of some numbers on active running back contracts to give you perspective as to why and where the Bengals were in this situation here. You see Alvin Kamara right now, if you look at overall value, his contract is $75 million, obviously a stellar running back in his own right. I mentioned his name earlier, Christian McCaffrey in San Francisco, taking on that number there. Derrick Henry, of course, highly productive running back at $50 million. Joe Mixon before tonight was tied for fourth in terms of overall value in the league at $48 million of his contract. I can't remember the exact number of Dalvin Cook's. I want to say it was maybe 50 to somewhere between the 50 to $60 million range. It was higher, slightly higher than Joe Mixon's, but again, it was a 4-year, $48 million deal. And then you look at the average annual value of $12 million. So he is tied for fourth in terms of overall value. I think it was fifth. This will switch here in just a second. Yeah, he drops down to fifth, just under Nick Chubb, and tied once again with Aaron Jones. He and Aaron Jones had, very similar contracts here, but look at the signed age as well. Aaron Jones 26, Joe Mixon 24. So Mixon was 24 at the time, much younger than, a little younger than Aaron Jones here. So just again, some snapshot numbers. I don't want to break out the abacus and over inundate you with all kinds of stuff here on Friday night, but that's kind of where in the Bengals were dealing, right? They had this contract that he signed, and they knew he was going to be a valuable guy. And I don't want to say that the Bengals didn't trust themselves in 2020 when they signed Joe Mixon to this deal. And what I mean by trust themselves, I mean, their draft picks, but maybe they didn't foresee Higgins and Chase both hitting to this extreme level. I don't know. And at that point too, Mixon was in his prime, and, a guy that had a lot of productivity and showed the team that he has earned one of the top running back contracts in the league. Unfortunately, now you look at it and you just kind of say, well, this is just not working, especially with the direction that we want to take the team. We value Joe Mixon. We value what he brings to the table, but we have a lot of other key pieces also to sign in this contract based on the league-wide devaluation of the position. This contract is kind of sticking out like a sore thumb a little bit. So that's where we are. We're going to get on out of here in just a second, but that's where we are with the Bengals and Joe Mixon. We'll see when it's obviously confirmed and or when the numbers come out, but the Bengals and Joe Mixon reportedly agree to a contract restructure, thus giving the team the ability potentially in the very near future to extend Joe Burrow, to extend T. Higgins, to extend Logan Wilson, and then potentially Jamar Chase. You've also got other guys coming up here too that we haven't really talked about. Of course, there's DJ Reader, there's Mike Hilton. There are a couple of others, Cheeto, that are coming up that, the Bengals may keep some or want to keep some or all of those guys. And we'll see what happens. Obviously, there's some question marks in terms of age and coming back from injury and other stuff with some of those players, but they are valuable players, especially presently. So we'll see if this, affects those situations as well. I'm Anthony Cosenza with CincyJungle.com. Thanks for hanging out with us late for some of you on a Friday night, but this is some big news. We didn't have a main live show this week. Kind of had some different family stuff going on, some personal stuff going on, and we just kind of decided that, hey, let's take a little step back this week as we start to gear up for training camp. We will have immense coverage on this show and on CincyJungle.com on Bengals training camp. We will have, I believe, our own Jason Garrison from 3 and Out will be at training camp practices, and he will give some reports there. We're going to have some special guests on our show and the other shows on the Cincy Jungle podcast channel, as well as all kinds of news, opinions, analysis, everything on CincyJungle.com. You got to like the Orange and Black Insider YouTube channel, which I believe is right there, down there, the show icon. Click that. Click the subscribe button. Click the bell to be notified when we go live, when new content is available. And, of course, give us a thumbs up if you like what we're doing on the channel. While we didn't have a live show this week, we had, this news show, but we also dropped a couple of videos. We spliced up the Sidney Jones potential breakout player. We also had a fun new one, Best Bengals Battles Seattle Seahawks. So go check out that one. Then, of course, 3 and Out dropped in episode 2. So there's still a lot of content out there. And, of course, there's some YouTube exclusive stuff. Some of that stuff is YouTube exclusive, but all of our shows are available on the Cincy Jungle podcast channel, whether that's iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, all of them. We are there. Give us a follow, a subscribe, and leave us a review if you can. Appreciate it. Have a good weekend, everybody. It's hot in my neck of the woods. I'm sure it's hot in yours. So go out, enjoy some sunshine. That's going to do it for us. Wanted to hit you with some breaking news and a little bit of reactions and what may be ahead for the Cincinnati Bengals, for Joe Mixon and a couple of other of their star players. Have a great weekend. We will see you soon. Hoo day, and take it easy.